Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the stream. We're just gonna be chilling and working on some stuff here in ZBrush. Working on this character specifically. I need to load in my spotlight reference real quick here, and then we can get started. But I'll give some time for some people to pop in here. And while that is happening, if you guys like this concept, go check out the concept artist. There's a link down in the description. It is D Dino over on ArtStation. I think I said that. But yeah, go check out their work. They got some really cool stuff. I'm a big fan of their work. And as well as if you... the colors are all messed up. If you like the stuff that I do here on my stream or on my YouTube channel, let me see, I think I have it open. Definitely check out my Gumroad. There's some paid content over there. If you like the free stuff, I always say that you'll like the paid stuff a lot more. I put a lot more work and time into this stuff. There's also newly added mentorship programs for one-on-one feedback, critique, and question and answer and all that. Samuel says Q&A in the chat. If you're new here, well then we always got time for question and answer. But yeah, feel free to pop out any questions in the chat, and anything that I can answer I will, to the best of my ability. And anything I can't answer, I'll just lie and make something up to sound real smart. But yeah, I think we're all good here to go ahead and get started. I got my reference set up. I'm just gonna slide it up a little bit here. I have a couple lists of things that I was working on during the last stream, and I'm going to be doing the same thing during this stream. So first off, we're going to be fixing some stuff down around the belt region here. There's a lot of junk going on. So I'm going to be changing some colors around. I'm currently using a material that you can get online for free called the ZBrush paint material. It's almost identical to the Skin Shade 4 material. It's a little bit more vibrant, and it has a lot stronger shadows in general. But really that's about the only difference, and you can kind of get that stuff by messing with the Skin Shade 4 if that's something that you want. But nothing crazy here in terms of poly paint materials or any of that. So on my list, I just have knife written really big. Because if we look at this knife, this fork knife over here, the angle of this and her leg and the belt, the way this is interacting, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense here. So I want to keep the placement and angle as best as I can, while I guess making it make more sense, because right now it's just kind of floating on her leg. So I started to put some geometry in there to essentially make it strap on to the belt. So I'm going to try to tweak that a little bit more and see what we can do. At least first. Like I said, this is going to be a pretty chill stream. We're not looking at anything hyper-specific, just kind of working on this character. A lot of stuff that I need to take care of, and then go from there. It's going to be a little bit easier for me to work on this if I start hiding a lot of this geometry. So I'm just going to use my selection tools and just come through and hide a bunch of junk that we don't need. So we'll hide the head and the hair and all that. And a few of this other stuff. So I've used, if you guys aren't familiar here in ZBrush, you can create start and end subtools, and they essentially act as groups a little bit. It's kind of the closest we've ever gotten to groups in ZBrush, unfortunately. I'm hoping in the next version we'll get some more kind of control over our subtools as a whole, but we will have to wait and see. Alright. Sometimes concepts can be tricky, absolutely. Trying to translate something from 2D to 3D always has its own individual challenges. Alright, so we've kind of soloed this stuff after some tweaking with our subtools, and now we can try to figure out how this is going to work. So right now I've just kind of thrown in some placeholder geometry. Let me change that. To kind of act as a quick strap for our belt here. And really it doesn't need to be anything crazy, I just want it to make a little bit more sense than floaty leg knife, which is what we currently have. Which I'm not a huge fan of. So maybe try to change the angle of this knife a little bit. Get it a little bit more flat against the leg here. Maybe pivot from this point. Just trying to get this to make sense in 3D space a little bit better. Because right now, I mean, in truth, all 2D concepts are always going to have things like this where the 2D artist didn't plan for something to exist in reality, and when you're trying to just get that one angle down like this, there's a lot of things that are going to end up being very problematic. So we kind of just have to try to account for some of these things as best as we can. So like I said, I've just done a pretty simple tube of geometry here, creased some edges, nothing crazy at all. And start modifying this a little bit. Try to pull that a little bit more in, tuck it up under that. And the pouches here on her belt are kind of in the same area of not really making too much sense. They're kind of floating there, so I've tried to mess with those a little bit more as well. And we'll see how that's going. I'm gonna probably add something on the back of this, like a little cube or something, just so it sticks out a little bit. Just have a little bit of a connection piece back there. Insert a perfect cube and go from there. Welcome everybody, this is kind of popping in here. For those that don't know or are new here, my name's Ben, or you can call me Follygon, doesn't really matter. Working on a concept by D-Dino. We're working on a few different things. I have a lot of stuff on the list here, and I'm going to be bouncing around quite a bit. But if you guys have any questions about ZBrush, digital sculpting, what I'm doing, my process, any of that, feel free to throw it up in the chat. So just a really simple cube down here. I don't even care if it's, you know, lined up really well, because it's not going to be seen. Really, I'm just trying to get something that's going to connect a little bit better down in here. It doesn't need to be perfect by any means. Just using a really large move brush to adjust some verts and push them around. I also am using my mask lasso tool with this. Just all at once. Get a little bit of a easier time to move your verts around when using masking on low poly subtools like this. And then of course I've turned off all my poly paint just to make it a little bit easier to see what's going on. Can maybe pull that out. Push some stuff around a little bit more. And there's a lot of stuff going on here. The way these are lining up, there's some interpenetration going on with this one, and maybe a little bit up in that corner as well. If we're looking at this just from straight on, it's not a big deal, but the thing is, if I start to move that out, just the placement of this in general is not great. So I think I'm gonna tweak it some, just so it makes more sense in 3D. And we don't have to hit those angles, I think, exactly for this to feel like it's the same character, or the same equipment on the belt, at least. And we got a lot going on here, so it's kind of masking some of that, which is great. Let's go back and look at our character as a whole here. If you were here for the last stream, uh-oh, got some stream health issues. Let me know if you guys are seeing any stuttering or anything like that. But if you guys were here for the last stream, I was doing a bunch of stuff to the face proportionally, as well as kind of just jumping around on some different anatomical aspects. If you guys remember, we raised up the shoulder, adjusted some stuff with the forms and the legs and the knees and the boots as well. We're going to be looking at kind of similar stuff here as well. One thing, let's see how easy this is going to be to do. So one thing I wanted to do was add a little bit of kind of a separation for the bottom part of this shoe. So let's, maybe not, that might be a little bit too much. It's these little details that kind of add some visual interest though. So let's look at, let's just look at boot, images. Something like, no, I don't want to shop. Something, just seeing how that lower edge kind of works on this. Normally for that sole, it's essentially the sole of the shoe is what I'm talking about, but what I want to do in 3D is just create a little bit of a separation between that lower and top portion of the boot here. So there's definitely more than a few ways we could do that. We might be able to use our topology to our advantage here. Let's look at, let's see if I can find. You gotta be careful on Google Images. You just get weird stuff. Turn on safe search next time. All right, let's play around here in ZBrush and see what we can come up with. So I'm gonna duplicate my boot and just work on one of these. Turn on solo mode as well. And let's look at this. So we could create geometry that follows the edge loop around here. It's not clean enough though that I would want to use that. We did something similar in the last stream, if you guys were here for that. So instead, what I'm going to try, let's use some masking tools instead this time. So I'm going to create a mask like so, and do this from the edge. So it doesn't need to be perfect. I don't need a perfect mask. What I more so need is just a little bit of a block out, and then I can go in with my mask pen and start to clean up that line to flow a little bit more how I imagined it. And then we're going to use this mask to insert some geometry along this edge here. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this because it's a pretty small detail, and it's not, I don't even know if I'm going to like it. So from here we have our mask. If you press Control W, that will polygroup your masked area, and then we can just delete whatever we don't need. This edge is a little bit dirty for what I'm about to do, so I'm going to go into Edge Loop and just run a quick group loops, and that'll kind of clean up that edge a little bit. And that'll be good enough for our purposes here. And then I can use a curve tube snap brush. All these are default brushes in ZBrush, and then I can just snap to this line by holding the Shift key while I draw out my curve. Let's try that one more time. There we go. It's a little bit messy around here, so we'll just increase our brush size. Tap, decrease our brush size. A little bit smaller, I think. Let's see. Nah, smaller still. Let's go with that, and then we can change it more if we need to. So to delete your curve, so you can't edit this anymore, you just tap on your geometry anywhere, or you can do that in your curve menu. A little bit easier that way though. And now we're left with this curve. And it's following the form pretty nicely. What I'm going to do is set this to negative and use a live boolean to cut out that form. Get a little bit of a clean form in there. But it's not exactly where we want right now, so let's subdivide a few times. And what I'm trying to do is delete the topology flow that's in there right now, so I'm going to dynamesh this curve. And again, the reason I did that, in some of these places it's starting to get a little warbly, there's some twist, and I want to get rid of, mainly the twist is what I'm trying to get rid of with this dynamesh. And then I'm just going to Z-remesh super low, and that should give us some nice clean flow for the geometry. And in areas where it's a little bit warbly still, you can come in and manually, with your Z modeler brush, delete edge loops and try to straighten out some of these lines. There's just a little bit too much geometry in there. Around here where it starts to kind of curve there, I might want to bevel this edge a little bit. So it's going to kind of split that edge loop. And that'll help it kind of turn a little bit sharper there. And then I can continue to go through and delete edge loops all along here. I'm deleting right now just every other edge loop, and that should give me a decently clean enough curve for our purposes, and still retain, you know, that shape that we've made. So all this is just to get a really nice, clean, subtractive piece of geometry. That's really the entire purpose of this. We want to bevel this one too. A little bit tighter maybe. And if you guys don't know how to use the Z modeler brush, all you have to do is hover over a vertice, an edge, or a face while you have your Z modeler brush selected in your brushes palette. Hold the space bar while hovering over one of those, and you'll get a bunch of different operations and functions that you can do. This is a context-sensitive menu, so if you're over an edge, you get different options than if you are to hover over a face. And then after you select that and set it up, you can just kind of go through and repeat the same operation pretty easily. Unfortunately, there aren't I would love an operation that could like read an edge loop and delete every other or every 2 spans or something like that. That would be super helpful. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist, but maybe in the future we'll get some more powerful poly modeling tools here. But with some pretty simple, I think, operations, we get a nice clean curve, and then I can even go through the big move brush, mask some stuff off maybe, and get this in a nice place. And then by setting that to negative again, we can see that we get that subtractive kind of beveled edge there. It's not the exact way that a boot or shoe would actually physically exist. I'm doing this in a quick way to get some extra detail in here. It's a little bit thick as well. But for the bottom part of the shoe here, it would actually be a little bit thicker on the bottom. So there are some things that we can do to maybe grow that out as well, now that we've started constructing this little subtractive piece here, this separation. So like I said, a little bit too thick. Kind of move this around a little bit. So we can go through and smooth out the curve by subdividing it a few times. That'll make our smooth brush a little bit less powerful. That's one way. Or we can just use our deformation palette and use the inflate operation and set that to negative. So let's try -10 maybe. Ooh, definitely too thin, so we'll just try half that. And I think that's looking a lot better. It's starting to go into the surface a little bit there. So while you're working with negative pieces and live boolean turned on, you can use your polyframe or Shift F hotkey to view that topology without switching it back and forth. Just makes it a little bit easier to tweak here if you can't see exactly what's going on. But yeah, I think that's going to be pretty close to what I'm looking for. Maybe move up a little bit more on this side just to match the other. Cool. And I'd mentioned that we could maybe grow the bottom portion of this to make it stick out a little bit more. Let's see what that's looking like just from a distance read. Change the color on that. Add our material and polypaint. When adding polypaint, you want to make sure that your RGB intensity is all the way up. And I think that reads pretty well as a small detail. It is still visible from back here. Adding in that color difference, and then once we render with shadows and everything else, it'll appear a little bit better too. I don't want to overdo it, and that's why I was trying to make sure that that thickness was just right. So if we wanted to make this boot feel a little bit more real, and not so kind of just straight flat to the ground, since we're kind of talking about those little extra details that add up, let's maybe grow that lower section here. Make this a little bit thicker on the bottom. So, there's a few ways we can do that. I think the easiest way to do that is going to just be to solo all of that geometry on the bottom and then just increase the size of it. Playing around with scale, maybe inflate. I'll show you guys a trick with inflate with stuff like that actually. I think that'll probably be the way we want to go. I'm also going to add some subdivs to that so it's a little bit more smooth. If you're working for production, you just want to make sure that you're not just using dynamic smooth and all that. So let's grab our slice curve brush. I'm going to press Ctrl W on this geometry to make sure that everything is polygrouped as a single polygroup. And I wonder if I still have, I don't have that mask from earlier. That mask from earlier would have been super helpful here. We don't have that, so let's maybe see if we can do a relatively quick selection using our slice curve brush and slicing up some geometry. I don't need this to follow the curve perfectly, but I do need it to follow somewhat within that line that I've created there. That might actually work. That might be better than I thought it was going to be. A little bit low on this side. It's unfortunate. Might be able to just do a quick extra slice through here. One thing that the slice brush can't do is it can't inverse your selection, and makes it a little bit annoying to work with. Let's, yeah, I guess let's just try to slice off this. So like I said, it doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to fit within this line. And I'm just hiding all of that, inversing my selection, seeing what this is looking like. Does that fit within that edge? Still doesn't. Making more cuts than I want. That's okay. We will have to clean this up. Maybe more so than what we want. And we can adjust that curve. So let's delete hidden on this. Control W, of course, to polygroup everything. Get rid of that extra geometry up top. And I'm going to turn off poly paint just so we can see a little bit better what's going on. So I've kind of sliced up this bottom piece here. And now I could run a close holes operation on this geometry if I wanted to. And then I could inflate out to maybe increase the size of that. But what you're going to see here is you're going to see some artifacts along this edge. The way inflate works is it grows out due to the surface normal. So all of these surfaces here are going to try to push up, and these are going to try to push out here, and then you're going to get this weird artifacting. So instead of closing holes, what we want to do is first inflate our geometry just a tad. So we're just trying to get that to grow out a little bit, and then you can run a close holes operation after you've done that. And it looks like we've got quite a few tiny little artifacts in here. So let's just look at maybe trying to delete a couple of these before we do anything else here. I want this close holes to be relatively clean. It doesn't need to be perfect because it's going to be fairly easy, I think, to clean up, but still. Back there we might have a couple issues as well. And then let me hide these. Delete those. Let's run a close holes really quick. See what this is looking like. And the way I want this in my subtool stack is I still want the negative piece to be below here, below this geometry, so that it's subtracting from that as well. So I don't think I have the pictures of the boots any longer, which is fine. I think I'm going to grow this out just a little bit, feeling a little bit small to me. Yeah, let's use deformation again. So again, what's good about that inflate is that it inflates along the normal. So when you're scaling, it's going to scale from wherever your point is or wherever your 3D gizmo is. And you can center that, but it's still not going to scale everything universally. So using inflate will, which is why we haven't added that top piece here to our geometry. So now I'm just going to clean this up. We're going to run a Dynamesh operation. We're getting some more artifacts over here, but with some pretty quick cleanup, I don't think that'll be much of an issue. Another thing that we could do is use some kind of proxy mesh as a boolean for the top piece of the geometry, and that would make sure that we're not getting any artifacts in that area as well. We might be able to kind of grow this out with a little bit of a trick. I think this geometry is going to be too thin to do this, but we can do a quick test. So with back, yeah, it's a little bit too thin. So maybe with move I can do this. So I am, oh, let me turn off perspective as well. So I am using my transpose line here. You can use your 3D gizmo. I have backface masking turned on. It's in your auto masking palette in your brush menu. And I'm looking at this from the top view and just kind of growing this in every direction. And I'm going to have to do this a little bit more strongly here. Get a little bit more room. So duplicate, let's undo that one, and let me move this down. Okay. Let's see what this is looking like. Like I said, it might be too thin for this, but I can play around with it for a minute and see if I can make anything from it. So we're getting the clean edge that I was looking for. I think it's going to be easier to just manually go through instead of tweaking another piece of geometry for this. It just kind of complicates things. Like I said, I didn't know if it would work or not, and it probably could if I spent some time playing around with it, but not too hard to manually clean up hard edges when we use our H polish brush. Where it does get tough though is in creased areas like this. You have to be careful. Don't want to screw up your form too much. I'm using a combination of just the normal brush stroke as well as holding Alt, and that's helping to build up the form if I push it down a little bit too hard. So the H polish is really great for these kind of hard edges. I would just be careful with it, as it tends to destroy your form rather quickly. It starts to really try to make everything super planar, as you can see there. But by using a softer brush stroke, you can kind of avoid that a little bit at least. So the way I've done this, we have some poly groups here, which is nice. Poly groups are always nice, especially along hard edges. We might be getting a little bit too much inflate back here as well, so maybe I don't... I can clean this up, of course, but the way I did this might have caused more problems than we want. More problems than we want to fix, I should say. Not too bad. We can always flatten this as well. If it's getting a little bit too rounded down here, trim it off. And this is going to be seen from a distance. It's not going to be inspected as closely as I'm getting here for sure. So we'll kind of take that into account. All right. Got some weird stuff going on with that image. I think I know what's going on. So the spotlight tool up here, if you guys can see through that, the way the spotlight tool works is it hides all black, and I guess these are just close enough to the value of pure black that it's also hiding them. It's a little annoying. I guess depending on your concept, if you're working off an image that's extremely dark like I am, kind of makes it a little tough. Let's see if we can maybe clean this up some. Not that, whoops, did not mean to decimate that. And we can always come back to this. We got tons of more stuff on the list. I have another list here in Photoshop of stuff that I was kind of looking at and correcting. I like to flip my image around, or take a screenshot, flip my canvas around, and go from there. But on that list, let's see. I think we took care of most of these in our last stream. Some things I maybe wanted to do was think about adding some seams to the clothing. But they kind of, it's hard to understand what exactly they were going for in the concept here, as this seam like vanishes almost. Kind of hard to tell. But maybe I could add in some seams just where I kind of think that they need to be added. We can go from there. Might be a little bit easier. Getting some problem areas. Let's see if we can fix this up. I'm just trying to keep this geometry as simple as I can. We're getting a little bit of a bevel kind of up into the shoe, and that's a problem just with that creased area as it comes down through here. I can move my camera this line. So as it comes down into that area, it's going to round out and try to, you can see it a little bit better from this angle. It's going to try to fill in this gap here between this area when I closed holes. Dynamesh does a little bit of a better job with that kind of stuff, but for the most part in those tight creased areas, it's pretty unavoidable. If the geometry was bending the other way, it would cause actually even more problems. So it's kind of just a little perk of ZBrush. Let's look at this subtractive piece in here. Maybe move this up. See if that can help a little bit. And then just now that we have all this geometry in here working together, we can start adjusting each thing individually, trying to get some better results. And I will turn the poly paint back on in just a moment, and we can adjust with that on as well. So I just need to move this curve, help to follow that edge a little bit better. Whoa. We might want to deflate this edge a little bit more too. And this edge looks like it could use some adjusting as well. Just some little tweaks here and there with the move brush, and I think we'll be ready to go. So we could spend a lot more time kind of cleaning this up and getting this perfect, but I would rather move on and try to work on more stuff than, you know, spend an hour or more working on this this one piece. So let's fix that a little bit. One more area here. And let's turn on our poly paint and see what things are doing. Move down, please. This is the main angle that I'm concerned with, so I'll spend a little bit more time there. We got our boot color. Let's turn on everything. And perspective here. And for the lower portion of that boot, let's try the same color first. Maybe make it a little bit darker or something. But the read that I want, you know, like I said, this is probably about as close as you're gonna get, or as close as you're gonna see this from. It's very small compared to the rest of our characters, so it is a detail, but you can maybe make that a little bit too dark, I think. Let's keep that the same color as the boot. If anything, maybe try adding like 15% of that darker color. The thing is that I don't want to draw too much attention to that area. So let's just leave it the same color for now, and maybe we can come back to it. I would also need to do the same thing for the other boot that we have going on back here. But let's forego that and look at a couple other things that we got on our list. Let's see. I am going to refresh my stream page here because it looks like I'm getting some low output readings. And it looks like I still am. Let me know if you guys can hear me, if everything's good. One sec here. Cool. Alright, I think it's good. YouTube likes to give a lot of these like false positives for low output readings. I'm not sure why it does it. But yeah, so there were some areas in the wrist here that I didn't really like. I thought it looked a little bit too tight, too awkward here, so I wanted to play around with that. What else did we have on our list? I played around with the hair, a lot of these forms, straightening that. Some seams we were talking about that we could look at. I did some stuff with the face posing and the necklace. I didn't really do anything to the necklace. So for seams and this wrist, let's look at this wrist first before we do seams, because this will be a little bit more different, a little bit different, a little bit maybe more interesting. So I think this wrist from this kind of front hero angle, this like tightness here, it's a little bit too strong. If we're looking at our reference here, the way that it was done in this concept, it's a lot more smooth the way that this is blending. Of course, there's like so much stuff that's super tight here, but we end up getting this really strong shadow along this edge. So I want to try to rein that back in some. So I'm thinking, let's just try kind of at first at the highest subdiv, just smoothing this out a little, starting to alleviate some of that shadowing that's going in there. Still really strong. Can maybe use, I'm thinking our trim dynamic brush and maybe start to fill in some of this crease and just come through here. It's essentially like adding a little bit of a bevel in here for that to transition. And it would kind of do this if you look at your own hand and try to pull your wrist back really far or put it on a surface. You're going to get this bunch up of skin here, but this is stylized to the point where I don't want to add, like, sit here and sculpt skin folds that would be appearing in here. So maybe just by adding in some extra form, smoothing that out, we can start to get that looking a little bit better. So that wraps around. I'm trying to look at this from multiple angles here as well. And now I can start to maybe smooth that out even a little bit more. So maybe it's a little bit tighter out here along the edges, and then it starts to smooth out even more around here. I just want to shift this enough in this direction so that that shadow isn't so prominent. And I think we're getting a lot better read from back here on that now. Oh, our hand's poking through a little bit there. Need to pull that up just a tad. Alright, I think that's looking much better. I'm just kind of rotating around. It looks like maybe there's a little bit of a bulge right there. Might just be the way I'm looking at this. When in doubt, switch back to one of your sculpting materials. Much easier to see. Cool. Well, that's looking a lot better, and I'm much more happy with that overall. A couple little other areas that might need to be cleaned up in the hand. I think that'll do it. So let's see here. This is all stuff for that just last 10% as we get very close to finishing this character. Let's reapply our color and material, just so there's no funny business going on there. When you're working on lower subdivision levels, and when you're using your Move and Smooth brush, which both by default have RGB on, and then you step back up to your highest subdiv and all the stuff that you're tweaking here, you can start to add in some artifacts to your poly paint and material data. So you want to just be careful that that doesn't happen. The necklace as well. In the concept, I have no idea what this is supposed to be. I've looked up images of the character, and I have no idea what they were going for with this. To me, it looks like a headphone jack, like an auxiliary cable. I don't know what that shape is supposed to be. So I am just going to add in something that looks similar to that. just so it kind of reads the same, and you can kind of go from there. So let's just grab a cylinder, and we'll get in here and tweak some of this. How do we want to do this? Let's hide everything but our necklace so we can get in here and do some work. Duplicate, and with my primitive brush, I already have some additional geometry added in here, so I have a creased cylinder that I like to use a lot, and that just makes it a lot easier. I create this geometry quite often, so I just made it easier for myself and added it to the primitive brush. If you guys want to know how to do that, in your brush palette, there are, let's see, actually, you can just do it straight from in here too. You can click on Create Insert Multi-Mesh, and it'll ask if you want to append whatever you have on screen to that brush that you have active, and you can do it that way as well. There's also some controls in the brush menu for actually adding and deleting all those different things under here in the Create menu. So let's just rotate and put this into place, and then we'll start kind of figuring it out as we go. Whatever this shape is supposed to be. It just kind of breaks up that line a little bit. Just kind of try to get something in here that adds a little bit of visual interest, maybe. And figure out the placement a little bit. So I guess what we can do is Z-modeler, bevel this edge, and one more time, delete hidden. So it's just like swooping down. It's just like, this is reversed. Let me flip my canvas here. Just coming, swooping down, and then blending up. Like I said, I don't know what this is supposed to be, so we're just making something that looks relatively similar. Pixelogic stream was amazing. Didn't catch it live, but it was great. Thank you. We'll be doing it again on next Tuesday. Same time, same place. I think it's noon Pacific time, 3 o'clock Eastern. So if you're around, definitely come hang out. I'm gonna undo the delete that I did there. This is why I kind of just left this plain before, because I didn't really even understand what I was looking at, what they were trying to accomplish. The problem with open face geometry in ZBrush, when you subdivide it, it'll shrink it like just way too much. There are ways to actually get around that, so it's not the end of the world, I guess, but Just trying to match the shape and form here a little bit better, so that that is reading properly. And I don't know, we can maybe try to add a little bit of visual interest to this just so it doesn't catch the light in such a weird way. A bunch of stuff that we can do to this, but let's just try a couple things here. When in doubt, bevel all your edges. That's how you create awesome hard surface geometry, guys. Bevel the heck out of it. Alright, we have a thing. And that thing's hole is too big. I wonder how many times that has been said. And maybe try to scale that in some. Sure, why not? Looks great. Let's sample a color. Kind of fill that in a little bit. Just trying to see how much that's breaking up the form there. So normally the character Domino is wearing like a bunch of necklaces and charms. I think she wears a dream. No, she doesn't wear it. Like I can't remember what she wears. She's got like a bunch of string type necklaces along her neck. But like I said, just something to get that basic shape and break up that form a little bit more. I essentially just want that hit, but we'll leave that for now. Maybe do some more stuff to that a little bit later. I'm gonna save that original necklace. It's hard to watch this at work when you keep on zooming in the chest area. Well, first of all, why are you watching at work? What are you doing? Can't do that. Second of all, you're welcome. I think that's just a little bit too light. Drawing too much attention to that. I wanted to break up that color a little bit. Just I don't want to draw attention to these at all. I think I'll just fill that in. That is not the color I wanted. I'll just do that. I think that's fine. Whoa. Come on. Is that the... Why does that look weird? Oh. Wait, I'm so confused right now. I guess that is this. Okay. Just the highlight there is confusing me. Alright, so what's next, guys? What is next? Nice to finally see this live. Awesome. Welcome to the stream. We're kind of just chilling and working on a lot of little things, really. We're kind of in the last 10% of this character and trying to put in 100% on the last 10%, as we like to say. Seams. Seams in the pants. So like I said, these seams kind of completely just vanish. This is like the only one that I see other than the block out colored seams. I don't know. We can try something here. I don't want to... Let's try just soloing this piece. Looks a little funny by itself, but that's fine. So I just need this. Let me turn on my belt as well. Wherever that is. Find my belt. So I essentially need this to come down this way, I think. And meet about there. So in the front view, like, man, this is like, I don't know what's going on here. Some of this stuff is just beyond how far you can and should push some stuff, but D-Dino makes it, like, he can't help but make everything he does look amazing, so. We will have to make it work, one way or another. So start off with some positive geometry for our seams, and then with some tweaking and live boolean. Oh, that's not good. Some tweaking and live boolean operations will be able to clean these up. But I just want to get the basic form in here. Let's see. There's also a limit to how long you can make curved tube geometry, if I remember right. Maybe there's not. I don't really want to crash the ZBrush either. Guess not. I thought there was. There's a limit to something. Oh, I think it's when you... I think there's a limit to how far you can continue to... I think there is a limit. It might not be on the initial stroke, but there is a limit to how much you can add after the fact, I think. If I remember right. So I've definitely like spent a long time adding strokes to pieces of geometry, and then I go back to the start and it's like disappeared. Completely gone. Alright, so we got some basic seams. Maybe there's no seam up here on the strap, so I'm gonna add one anyway, because I think it adds some extra visual interest. Make sure I pick the right brush here. Make these about the same size. So I don't remember what size stroke I was using. That looks good. Okay. Like I said, doesn't need to be perfect, doesn't need to be clean. Just needs to be in the same general area. So let's try that. Can auto groups and then hide this one and delete it. And then from here it's just a matter of cleaning these up. They're about the size that I want already, but I think after we do some different operations here, it's going to change them a little bit. We'll have to re-inflate these. Yeah, just doing some detail work for sure. Quick Dynamesh on these pieces of geometry. Can lower this resolution quite a bit. Just connecting these curves really quick. Let's go even lower. Might be too low. Might not be low enough. So move, back face masking, just try to thicken up some of that area. The inflate brush works pretty well too, but you have a little bit less control. Just inflates uniformly along a tube, whereas with this move back face you can control that a little bit more. Okay, so that's fun. Let's split this off. Remesh. Just want to get a decently clean curve there, which we have. One over here as well. And now we're going to use these, of course, like we did exactly with our boots. We're going to use these as subtractive pieces of geometry. So we'll have to tweak them a little bit more from here. But we've started to get going in the correct direction. I'll probably need to manually go in and delete a bunch of extra edge loops that are just making our form a lot more complicated than it needs to be. So I want, if you look here, the curve is just starting to get a little bit out of hand. So we can start kind of deleting some of these. Now, this is just one way. Let's set that to do nothing. This is one way that you can do this, right? You can always come through with a brush and manually add in whatever you want for a seam. There are specific brushes that you can create that look more like seams. The way I'm just doing this, it's a little bit, well, it's completely non-destructive, and you can control and edit your curve after you've added it to your surface, which is really nice. So we want that extra geometry along that curve. That's fine. Here and here. Delete some of that. So anywhere where the curve starts to turn, I want it to hold to the surface a little bit better. But anywhere where it's flat, let's set that to do nothing as well. Anywhere where it's flat like this, we can just delete a bunch of these. And when you're working with the Z Modeler brush, I highly recommend that you quick save fairly often. In particular, if you're working with symmetry while you're working with the Z Modeler brush. The Z Modeler brush is one, it's a little finicky, but two, in particular with symmetry, it will destroy your life. Bad things can happen. It'll like completely screw something up, crash, and then you'll reload and they'll have that change still done to it. And it's like, oh, well that's actually exactly what I wanted, ZBrush. How did you know? Alright, so I'm just using my move brush here a little bit, clean up that curve, and we can, it gets a little warbly through here. So we have a few more spans of geometry, which is fine. Maybe we can inflate some areas a little bit better too. I think for the most part we're almost there though. Everybody's like, yeah, the details, that's the fun part. It's not. It's really not. It's the tedious part. So that's still really thick, I think, and there's some simple changes we can make to that curve with our deformation palette that will make that a lot more thin. So let's do that really quick. We'll just inflate by -3. -5 more, maybe. Okay. So it's a little bit more thin in certain areas, so I'm just gonna thicken up that part there. Maybe a little bit along that curve. A little bit up here. Cool. So that's one down. The one on the other side, I have that combined with this actually. So I'm gonna split that off and work on it separately so I don't end up screwing up anything on the piece that we already have. So one big one done. There is one other big piece on the other side, and then we have just these two small ones up here. These will be really easy to change. So let's do those next, since it'll be so easy. Just extend our curve past where we need it. And delete a butt ton of geometry here. Not really, there's not a ton. Delete a lot of spans though. So I'm just extending that beyond the surface slightly. And I don't want to have this interpenetrate the surface too much because it gets pretty thin in here. I don't want the skin to be seen. Through here that might also be an issue. I have an idea though. I have an idea of something that we can do. So it will actually, we'll have to change the order of our subtools so that's not going into the skin up there, but there's some stuff that we can do to play around with this to fix that. We will look at that in a moment. I see some more people popping into the stream. Welcome, guys. Just hanging out, doing some ZBrushing, working on a character, making some seams, checking off as much off the list as we possibly can right now. Almost done with this character. Just the last little bit. Finishing your work. It's an important step of the process. Sometimes it sucks. It's where you gotta put in. The first 90% are like, yeah, we did it. And then it's like that last 10%, it's like an extra 100% that you need to add in here. Awesome. It's like almost working on a whole nother character. Just like so many little things that you need to do. Now that needs to be thinned out quite a bit to match our seam on the side. So maybe like -10 or so. And set that to negative. Even more, I think. I'm using my smooth brush just by barely tapping on my surface there. I want to be really careful though, not to thin it out too much because you'll end up just erasing your geometry. So I'm just kind of tapping here very gently. And it's getting a little warbly. It's not really matching the surface as much as I want. The curve up here is not helping. A little bit better on that side. The geometry here, there's more than a few stars going on. There's one really bad one right there. It's causing some issues. All right, probably even a little bit more thin, I think. And we will call that good for now and look at this last one on the other side. So a lot of the time I don't like to manually sculpt seams in clothing unless I'm going for a very particular look with like a seam brush that I've built out. And the reason for that is because after you start to sculpt in your seam, I'll make this nice and big. You have your seam here, and you know you're sculpting this directly on your geometry, which is fine, but there are some problems with that. One, the resolution is a little bit low on this, so now I might want to subdivide up and continue sculpting. And now that I've sculpted in this line, let's say I go around and make a ton of changes, and now I like all these forms that I've made completely different. I can't really edit this curve. I can't edit this seam that I've made. If I'm like, oh, I want this line to be a little bit more straight this way, kind of curve more towards your back. Get a little bit more of that flow in there from this view. See, and when I do that, we end up kind of just shifting the entire clothing. I can't just move only the seam. No matter, you know, it doesn't really matter what size I make my move brush, but I'm ending up changing the entire basic form that we have underneath there. So that's why I like to use the live Boolean system. We have this nice non-destructive way of adding in some really cool seams and forms with you know, I used to do it with Dynamesh as well, because Dynamesh works just as well as live Boolean, but now you can kind of pre-visualize it, which is awesome. So I love the live Boolean system now. Before with Dynamesh, it was just all, you know, you got what you got, and then you had to undo it and then retry, and you couldn't really see what it was going to look like before you added that change in there. The way it is now is just a million times better. That was like one of the coolest tools added to ZBrush that I've had since I started sculpting here. That and the ZModeler brush are like just top notch. So I think our seam's thickness is actually pretty close already to what we want, but unfortunately we just got too much geometry here causing a lot of this warble, so our line's not very straight. So we want to get in there and edit a lot of that and try to correct a lot of what we got going on here in the form. So we'll just do the same thing as what we did on the other side. ZModeler and deleting some edge loops. And I'm gonna look at this from this side view here. I'm going to turn off live Boolean as well. Live Boolean causes a bunch of issues with your polyframe data, which can be a little bit annoying. So it's sometimes best to just toggle it off while you're sitting here working on your geometry. Ooh. And you can see where we're getting all of this kind of uneven surface. I call it warble. That's what, I don't know why I call it that. It's warbly, I guess. It's really the only time I use that word. It's what other sculptors call it that I've worked with in the past. Warble. So it's not quite as tight of a curve on this side of the body as it is on the other. So I can start to delete a few more of these edge loops where they are unnecessary. Wow, that gets super thin down through here. Just leave that on, I guess. And these are the things that I really take notice of when I'm sculpting and looking at other people's work. The cleanliness of your form. One, just because, you know, I do stuff for production mostly, and two, I think it shows, I think there's kind of like this big gap in small changes that you can make. And what I mean by that is essentially, it might not be obvious to the person that just looks at your artwork for 6 seconds, but you know, other sculptors and other artists that look at your work are going to notice these little things where you have just a nice, really clean seam running up through your leg instead of, you know, having something that you just threw in there that's looking like this. That doesn't look good, right? So just getting these forms nice and clean, or as clean as you can. It's really important to me. And especially if you're working on stuff for production. I mean, could you imagine working on a toy and then seeing that toy be reproduced hundreds or thousands of times, and there's that one thing that's off in it that you can't unsee? You're like, ah, no, I could have done that better, or I could have done that differently. That's the kind of stuff that I think about. Look at that. That's looking nice and beautiful. Nice and clean and smooth. I think it might be too thin on this side compared to the other. I guess let's turn on live boolean and negative and find out. So a little bit thin in this area. Try to make that a little bit more thick. I'm just using my move brush, auto masking, backface masking. And kind of rotate around here, get a little bit of a more of a distance view. I think overall I'm going to just inflate ever so slightly. So let's do deformation inflate, like 5-ish. There we go. That's looking good. All right. So yeah, that's how I would create some nice non-destructive seams for our character's clothing. Now, unfortunately, so the way live boolean works, merge all these. Anything that is above this subtool in my list will be affected by that negative stroke. So let's look here. I'll keep this. I'll keep that white so that you can see the seam really strongly there. So unfortunately, like our body is above our seam. Let's hide this. So you can see there it's starting to go into the skin. So that's unfortunate. We don't want that. So we can go back to our seam and clean that up or move it out of the way so it's not going into the body there. So let's go. Let's just try to find some of these areas where there might be some problems. And we could also, you know, this is just a preview of what it's going to look like. So once I actually subtract this from the surface, it actually won't be that much of a problem. But at least in the preview, we can just make sure that that's looking good, not getting in the way of anything. And again, just kind of keeping it bright white for the time being. I might want to rotate that seam more to the outer portion of that leg. Unfortunately, I think we're a little bit too high up. You can see here kind of coming in more to the side of the leg there. Here a lot more on top. So that's unfortunate, but we can correct that. Let's see. Yeah, I didn't realize because I had my knee hidden, so I couldn't really, I wasn't really accounting for that angle there. So I'll turn that back on just so we make sure we follow that edge a little bit more closely, and then we can, it'll probably just be faster and easier to create a new curve. If I try to move that one around, it's not going to be our friend. So let's find our belt real quick, just so I know where that lines up. Oh, there it is. And I am just going to delete all this. Delete hidden. Cool. So more so from here. Whoa, come on. Undo that, try to draw this again. Find that angle a little bit better. And then adjust, I think, this area right here. think that'll be much better once I go through and make those changes. That beeping is super annoying. Alright. Well, we've done a lot of stuff with seaming and subtractions this stream. It's just kind of how the list turned out and how much detail work we're doing. Mask must be cleared. But if you guys have any questions unrelated, we can look at something else before we go. I need to go, it's pretty late for lunch, but I need to go grab some food here in a little bit. But if you guys have any questions, probably stream for another half hour or so. So we got plenty of time. Let's try lower resing this. Clean up the curve. Getting some weird artifacts. Weird turn in the surface there. You can continue to remesh a piece over and over, but the more you do that, the more of the original form you'll start to lose. And the more you do it, it'll actually shrink in that geometry more and more and more. So if I sat there and just kept remeshing and remeshing and remeshing, it's eventually just going to completely... Well, for this, it does need to be more thin, so it's not a huge deal, but for something like the body or anything else that you're working on, you probably don't want that to happen. This is a rare case where we do. Ooh. Delete. Alright, just kind of evaluating my surface here a little bit. I can delete most of these edges. There's quite a bit of unevenness kind of going in through here that we can remove, namely right around here. Let's de-inflate just a tad before we move forward. I'll just match that top piece a little bit, and then we'll go from there. I'll try to do this one relatively quick. I think this one turned out a little bit better than our previous curves. This is mainly where some areas are, so I'm just going to delete both of those, move that one up just a tad. So I don't know how much of that you can see if I undo. So this is the kind of stuff that we're looking for. How it's really like, it's really slight, but as I start to clean that up, it really starts to add up very quickly. All these little changes that you make. And I mean, that's really I guess that's kind of what art or sculpting really is, just making a bunch of little changes until your thing that looks bad doesn't look bad anymore. But there's a lot more to keep in mind than just that. I wish it was that easy. It's still a little bit too thick, but cool. Put that on negative. As well as that. And rotate. Much better. Now, I could have moved the previous curve that we had, but it would have been a huge pain in the butt to try to line this up with my surface. There are some tools like the matchmaker brush. I think it's called the matchmaker brush. What is it? Is it gone? Did they remove it? Because nobody Nobody used it. Matchmaker. No, it's still here. Yeah, there's like stuff that you can, there's a brush that you can use to align stuff to a surface, but it's very finicky and it's somewhat, I don't see a lot of people use it really anymore. It's pretty deprecated. There's not a lot of tools for aligning stuff to the surface though, other than that, and then I can't remember what it's called. I don't remember the hotkey to pull it up, but there's a way that you can drop your model to your canvas and add detail to it in 2.5D. Nobody really uses that either anymore. It's still here though. It's still in ZBrush, it's just hiding. Not as prominent. So we also want to make our seams obviously a different color. I just kept them white so that I could see them much better. So probably just the same color here or a little bit darker. Fill that in. So, you know, after I fill in that color, it's obviously a small change, but it's these small changes that, like I said, start to add up and add a lot more variety to your work. Let's try making them a slightly darker color. Honestly, I think that draws like too much attention to them, so I think I'm just going to keep them the same color. And adjust them where need be. And then once you're really happy with what you have, you can physically subtract that using the live boolean menu down here. Make boolean mesh. But you want to make sure that you only have visible what you want to be affected by the live boolean operation. Cut off her head because I can't see what's going on over here. And I might make these even more thin. I don't know. But because we made these in a non-destructive format, we actually have that option. Whereas if you just hand sculpted them on here, it might be a little bit faster to do it that way, but now we can tweak and adjust to our heart's content. I think we're just a little bit too thick over here. Might be zooming too far in on the chest for Ariel. She's still watching at work. Look, there's no nudity here. We're keeping things PG-ish. Well, look, there's nothing wrong here. But yeah, I guess it could be weird if a coworker walked by and saw this on your monitor. That might, especially if you're not working, you know, in a creative industry. It's not my fault, guys. It's not my fault that your coworkers don't understand art. So that whole surface there is pretty all over the place. I'd like to just take a minute, try to clean it up some. Just too uneven. Okay. Just too much unevenness altogether here. Being annoying. And that's much better, but like I said, I might want to thin that out a little bit. I don't know. That one looks pretty good all the way through. Cool. We did it, guys. We made some seams, and I think that little bit of extra visual interest and detail in there adds a little bit more life to the clothing and the character as a whole. Cool. Well, let's see here. We got a little bit more time. Ooh, there was the other boot. So at the beginning of the stream, one of the first things we did was add in some additional form to our boot here. That other one definitely needs that as well. So let's write that down so I don't forget, because that would be awesome. Since I've been sculpting this whole character asymmetrically, and I can't tell you how many times I'm like working on one part, and then I'm like, wait, I didn't do it to the other side. That's right, no symmetry. What else? What else? Let me find my other list. I got too many lists. I should concatenate these a little bit. We fixed that wrist, got rid of that super awkward shadow, added in some seams, bottom of the shoe. Yeah, okay, so I think I'll do some more work to the bottom of, just close that, bottom of that boot, that booty, not the booty, but the boot E. And yeah, we'll work on a bunch of other stuff in our next stream. Probably still on this character. If you guys were around for, let me find this guy here real quick. If any of you were here for my live stream on the Pixelogic channel, where did I hide this gooby? There he is. What happened? What's wrong? It's not loading my Z tool. Whoa, that's weird. When something is not working the way it should be in ZBrush, that's always a great time to save. So if you guys were around, let me refine this guy, Goobert here. Oh, now I'm so stupid. There we go. I was opening the wrong thing. Yeah, so I made I started working on the head for Goobert here. So maybe in the next stream here before, I'm going to be working on this character more on the ZBrush live stream as well, on the Pixelogic channel. And that's next Tuesday, so be on the lookout for that. But before then, we might do some other stuff with the body of this character. I don't want to add in asymmetry until I, successfully block out the entire character and all the proportions and everything. Then we can kind of come back to old Gooby here and keep going on him. So if you guys are interested in that, I might do that next stream, since I'm kind of in the boring stages of this character, more of the finishing area. So I know a lot of this stuff can be pretty boring, but it is necessary for me to do all this work. And just kind of pushing it to that final, like I said, that final 10%. It's really hard, but it is really worth it. Let me save this out. And I think I'm gonna go grab some late lunch. If I can. Too many files, too many folders here. There we go. Cool. All right. So thank you guys for coming and hanging out on the live stream here. This concept is by DDino on ArtStation. If you're interested in his work, there's a link down in the description. Go check him out. He's a really cool artist. He likes to push his stuff really far and make it really hard for people to make his work into a 3D concept. Not intentionally, he's just that kind of artist, and he's extremely talented. Go check out his work. As well as, if you're interested, go check out my Gumroad page, where if you like the live stream here, and if you like the free content that I do on my YouTube channel, there's my Gumroad with some paid content. I released a new appealing female face sculpting course recently. That's on there, as well as some one-on-one mentorship if that's something you're interested in. And then, you know, brushes, materials, and some other courses on there as well. So if that's something that you're interested in, there's a link down in the description. Go check it all out. I would greatly appreciate it. And with all that said, thank you guys for coming and hanging out, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. And I want to see some more people doing some ZBrush stuff. Everybody's in here hanging out, lurking, but go join the ZBrush Discord channel and go post some of your work in there. I want to see some of it as well. So with that all out of the way, I will see you guys later. I'm gonna go grab some food. Later.